My name's Harold Brooks, 70 years old, a man who built his whole life out of wood and watched it burn for one reason: greed wearing my son's face. You see, it all started the day I looked across the kitchen table and spoke the words that changed everything. Dad's lost it all, Jason. $5 million. Savings, investments, even the land value. It's all gone. He gave me a cold, ruthless smile. Didn't even ask if I was okay. You broke, Jesus. You really are an old fool. I told you to let me handle the books. But no, you had to play cowboy with your retirement. And that was the moment I knew. The moment the son I'd raised with my own hands finally showed me what hid behind that perfect smile. My 40 years' worth of tools still hung on the wall, and he sold them. He sold me. That night, I sat in the dark staring at the hands that once taught him how to hold a hammer. And I realized this: a man's heart doesn't break when his son walks away. It breaks when the son stays, and you realize he's no longer the child you raised. So I made a promise. If my son wanted to learn the true value of money, I would teach him, not with anger, not with violence, but with something much colder. A plan began, the kind that doesn't destroy a man, but wakes him up. You can tell a lot about a man by the way he treats a piece of wood. Some carve it with patience. Some just cut it fast and call it work. I spent 45 years shaping wood with my hands, not for money, not for pride, but because it listened. It was honest. Unlike people. The morning Jason came back, I smelled betrayal before I saw his face. Maybe it was in the way his car engine echoed down the gravel road, too loud, too polished for this small town. Or maybe it was in the cologne that killed the scent of pine inside my shop. He stepped out, wearing a suit that looked more expensive than my entire house. "Dad," he said, smiling that tight smile he'd learned from boardrooms. "You still working on those chairs?" I nodded, wiping sawdust off my hands. The wood smelled clean, fresh oak cull that morning. He looked around, nose wrinkled, like he'd stepped into something outdated. This shop was the last thing I'd built with my late wife, Anna. Every beam carried her laughter. Every nail held her patience. Since she passed, this place was the only part of life that still made sense. The hum of the sander, the rhythm of the hammer that was my heartbeat. Jason didn't see any of that. He saw square footage. "Dad, you know this property could sell for a fortune now," he said, stepping over a pile of cedar boards like they were trash. "You could move somewhere warmer, maybe Florida. Cash out while it's still worth something." I laughed, the dry kind of laugh that comes when a man's too tired to argue. "This house ain't for sale, son. I built it with my hands." He smiled again, that plastic smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Hands don't hold value, Dad. Not anymore." Behind him, Liam was stacking wood in the back, sleeves rolled up, face streaked with sweat and sawdust. That boy never had much, but he carried gratitude like armor. He caught my eye and nodded, the kind of nod that says, "Don't let him take what's left of you." Jason turned, noticing him for the first time. "Still got him around?" he asked, voice sharp. "Yeah," I said. "Still got him." Jason shrugged. "Guess charity makes you feel good." The words hit harder than a hammer slip. Liam froze mid-step, but I shook my head slightly, told him not to respond. I'd learned long ago, when a man thinks money makes him superior, no amount of truth can reach him. We sat at the old kitchen table that night, the one with scratches from Jason's childhood toys. He poured himself a drink from my cabinet without asking, bourbon I'd been saving since Anna's funeral. He sipped and said, "You've got equity here, Dad. House, land, workshop, easily 7 figures. You should think about liquidating." I didn't answer right away. My eyes wandered to the corner of the room, Anna's rocking chair still creaking with the wind through the cracked window. I said softly, "You know, your mom wanted this place to be a home, not an investment." Jason exhaled like I had missed the point. That's exactly what I mean, Dad. You're living in the past. You're almost 70. Don't you want to secure your future before it's too late? That word too late hung in the air like sawdust after a cut. I set my drink down, leaned back and watched my son. My blood talked to me like I was a portfolio on the verge of collapse. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the smell of oak through the cracked door. I used to think that scent meant life, the honest kind earned through sweat and patience. But that night, it smelled like the end of something. Jason stood up, brushing imaginary dust off his sleeves. He looked me straight in the eye, his tone colder now. Dad, you should start thinking about your future before it's too late to change the will. I didn't move, didn't blink, because right then I realized something I should have known all along. My son didn't come home for me. He came for what I'd built, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure which one of us was the real stranger in that house. I still remember the sound of that first hammer. Jason ever held a soft clink that barely dented the nail. He was 7, sitting on my workbench, his little feet dangling, trying so hard to copy me. Every time he missed the mark, he'd look up, waiting for me to laugh. But I never did. I'd just guide his hand, tell him, "You don't fight the wood, son. You listen to it." And back then he'd nod like he understood. Maybe he did for a while. On Saturday mornings, we'd make birdhouses together. Anna would bring us lemonade, and Jason would get sawdust in his hair, pretending to be annoyed. When we finished, he'd run to hang the birdhouse outside before the paint dried. He was proud of those crooked edges. He'd point and say, "Look, Dad, it stands." Those were the days when a simple nail meant something. But somewhere between the hammer and the high school diploma, something shifted. The older Jason got, the less he came to the workshop. The scent of pine lost its magic. Numbers, profits, and return rates replaced it. He started wearing cologne that smelled like ambition and stopped wearing smiles that looked like mine. I tried to keep him close. I offered to teach him the craft proper, the way a man passes his wisdom down. He said, "I don't need to smell like wood to make a living, Dad." And that's when I realized I'd raised a son who saw sweat as failure. Years later, I met Liam. He was 12, thin as a rail, wearing a jacket 2 sizes too big, sitting on the steps of St. Mary's Church. The priest said his parents had died in a fire. No relatives, no one coming, just another forgotten boy in a forgotten town. When I asked him his name, he said Liam, like in the movies. I chuckled. "Well, Liam, you ever used a hammer before?" He shook his head. "No, sir." So I handed him one. It was the same hammer Jason had once held. He gripped it wrong at first, but he didn't let go. That's what caught me. His hands were trembling, but there was hunger in the way he looked at that tool, like it meant a chance. Years passed, and that boy learned faster than I ever expected. He didn't just build furniture. He built faith back into this old house. The creak of every new floorboard was proof that hard work still had a pulse. When he turned 18, he gave me a gift, a hand-carved box, with my initials HB etched into the lid. Inside it, just one note: "Thank you for giving me a home." I kept that box on my nightstand. Still do. Jason never saw it. He never came around long enough to notice. The last time he visited before Anna's funeral, he spent more time on his phone than talking to her. She forgave him like mothers do. I didn't. Sometimes late at night, I'd catch myself wondering where I went wrong. Maybe I gave Jason too much comfort and not enough lessons. I bought him what he wanted when he was a boy, thinking love was measured in things. But love, real love, is time and truth. And I gave that to Liam. The day before Jason showed up again, Liam and I were sanding an old oak table. He looked at me and said, "Mr. Brooks, You ever wish you had a son who worked like you? I smiled. I did. But I didn't know it until he walked into my shop one cold November morning. He grinned and got back to work. That night, I sat alone staring at the family photo on the mantel, me, Anna, Jason as a boy. Then I looked at the newer one beside David, me and Liam in the workshop, both covered in dust. One picture framed by the past, the other by the present. Somewhere between them was the truth. I raised one boy out of duty and found another out of grace. The next day, Jason came back again, all polished confidence and impatience. He found me telling Liam an old story about Anna's first chair, the one she'd made before we were married. He waited until I finished, then said flatly, "Dad, enough nostalgia. Just sign the damn papers." He slid them across the table like a dealer at a poker game. "Papers for what?" I asked. "For selling this house," he said. "You'll get your cut. I'll handle the rest." I looked at his hands, smooth, pale, untouched by labor. The same hands that once held a toy hammer and dreamed of birdhouses. I didn't sign. I just stared at him long enough for him to look away first. He stood up, voice sharper now. "Dad, don't let emotions mess up business. Be smart for once." The room went quiet. Even the clock seemed to stop ticking. I wanted to tell him what real smart was, building something that lasts longer than you. But I didn't. Not yet. Because I'd already decided, if my son only spoke the language of money, then I'd teach him what happens when it runs out. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind that smells like rain and sawdust. I was sitting at the kitchen table, bills scattered like fallen leaves, pencil behind my ear. Jason barged in without knocking. He never knocked anymore. Men who think they own the world rarely do. He dropped a folder on the table. "Buyers are ready. I just need your signature." I looked at the papers, contracts, numbers, lines of ink that could erase 40 years of sweat in a single pen stroke. "I'm not selling," I said quietly. Jason exhaled hard, the way a man does when patience is running on fumes. "Dad, stop being stubborn. You're sitting on money you'll never use. Do you even know what these taxes cost you each year?" I kept my eyes on the wood grain of the table, tracing its lines like roads leading nowhere. "Jason, there's something you should know," I said, voice low. "There's nothing left to sell." He froze. "What the hell does that mean?" "I lost it," I said, "all of it. The savings, the investments, even the land value. It's gone." I let the lie fall between us, like a stone in water. The silence that followed was heavier than truth. Jason blinked as if trying to process a language he didn't speak. "You're kidding." I shook my head. "No. Bad decisions may be bad luck. Doesn't matter now. I'm broke." He laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "You broke God. You really are an old fool. I told you to let me handle your accounts. But no, you had to play cowboy with your retirement." I didn't respond. There are moments when silence is the only thing that keeps your dignity intact. He paced the kitchen like a wolf trapped in a cage. "So what now, huh? You gonna live off Social Security? Jesus, Dad? Do you even think about anyone but yourself?" That one cut deep. I'd spent a lifetime thinking about him, feeding him, educating him, watching him grow from a boy with scraped knees into a man with sharp edges and no softness left. And yet here he was, blaming me for a loss I'd invented to see who he really was. From the doorway, Liam appeared, wiping his hands on a rag. He'd been sanding a cabinet out back. He looked between us, confused. "Everything all right, Mr. Brooks?" I nodded slowly. "Everything's fine, son." Jason snorted. "Son, please. You're talking to the help like family now." Liam's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. He just stepped closer, put a steady hand on my shoulder. That small gesture, quite respectful, said everything Jason's words never could. Jason caught it. His face twisted. You know what? Keep your broke little project and your charity cases. I'm done trying to save you from yourself. He stormed off toward the garage. I heard drawers slam, metal clatter. When I followed, my chest went hollow. He was loading my tools into boxes. The same set I'd used since I was 23. The hammer Anna gave me our first Christmas, the chisel my father left me, the plane that had carved every piece of furniture in this damn house. Jason, stop, I said. My voice came out like gravel. He didn't. You don't need this crap anymore, he muttered. You said you're broke. Consider this repayment for all the money you wasted. I wanted to shout, to grab his arm, to tell him that those tools were my story, my entire life in steel and wood. But I didn't. Because in that moment, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Not greed, but emptiness. A man chasing money because he'd forgotten what anything else felt like. He carried the last box out to his car, slammed the trunk, and looked back at me one final time. You know, Dad, he said, smirking, you're lucky I don't send you the bill for gas. The car roared down the dirt road, kicking up dust that hung in the air long after he was gone. Liam came to stand beside me, quiet as always. You gonna be all right? He asked. I nodded, though my throat felt tight. Yeah. Let him go. He hesitated. You didn't really lose everything, did you? I looked at him, that boy, who'd never asked for anything, who gave more respect in silence than Jason ever did in words. Not everything, I said finally. Not yet. That night, I sat alone in the workshop. The shelves were bare, dust settling where my tools once lived. The air felt different, hollow, like the house itself was holding its breath. I stared down at my hands, rough, calloused, lined like old tree bark. These hands had built homes, cradled a wife, lifted 2 sons. Now they were empty, but not powerless. I whispered into the stillness, if you want to know the value of money, son, I'll teach you, but not the way you want. There's a strange kind of peace that comes after losing everything, the kind that strips a man down to bone and purpose. A week after Jason left, I stood in the middle of my empty workshop, tracing my fingers over the dust where my tools used to be. The air was still heavy with sawdust and silence. I found an old blueprint, tucked behind a beam, a sketch I'd drawn decades ago for a carpentry co-op I never had the money to build. The edges were yellowed, corners torn, but the lines were still strong. That night, I spread it out on the kitchen table, lit the old desk lamp, and started drawing again. Not a house this time, a plan. A blueprint for something that would outlast both my name and my anger. The next morning, I sold a few things: the old pickup, Anna's antique mirror, a storage lot I hadn't visited in years. It wasn't much, but it was enough to buy a lease on a small warehouse down by the river, a place that used to store grain, but now smelled of rust and rainwater. I walked through it, boots crunching on broken glass, sunlight slicing through the holes in the roof. I could almost hear hammers already. By the end of the month, the sign went up, Brooks Foundation, learning through craft. It wasn't fancy, just a painted board nailed to the door. But when the first few kids wandered in, thin, tired, suspicious, I knew it was the right fight. Liam was there from day one. He handled the books, taught safety basics, fixed what I couldn't. The boy had grown into a man without me realizing. There were nights we'd work till the streetlights blinked on the hum of the saw, mixing with the sound of him humming old Irish songs under his breath. We didn't talk much about Jason at first. I think Liam was scared of saying the wrong thing. But some evenings when the day was long and the coffee had gone cold, I'd catch myself saying, "You know, Jason used to help me sand the edges of the birdhouses when he was little." Liam would smile tautly. Bet he was good at it. He was, I'd say. Until he learned there was no profit in it. The boys we trained started bringing friends. Word spread. Within 6 months, we had a dozen regulars, runaways, ex-cons, veterans who couldn't find work. They came broken, but they stayed because the place gave them something money couldn't buy: pride. Every Friday, we'd gather in the corner office for what we called the handshake. No contracts, no resumes, just men shaking hands after a week of honest work. I'd tell them, "You earn a living with your hands, but you earn respect with how you use them." They'd laugh, not realizing that line came from something I once told Jason. One afternoon after class, Liam brought me a cup of black coffee. He leaned against the doorframe watching me carve the name Brooks Foundation into a wooden plaque. "You ever think he'll come back?" he asked quietly. I didn't look up. People only come back when they've run out of places to go. He nodded, thinking. "And when he does," I smiled faintly, running my thumb over the fresh engraving. "Then I'll be here, same as always. Only difference is, this time I won't be the one asking forgiveness." For the first time in years, I slept through the night. No anger, no bitterness. Just the sound of rain tapping on the tin roof and the faint scent of pine drifting through the open window. Weeks turned into months. The foundation started to grow faster than I expected. We got small donations, local press, even a segment on the regional news. Retired carpenter teaches life lessons through wood. They made me sound like a saint, which was funny, considering what I was planning next. Because under all that calm, the laughter, the lessons, the fresh paint on the walls, there was still a fire inside me. A slow, steady flame that wanted truth. Not revenge through pain, but through exposure. One evening, while I was showing the boys how to align dovetail joints, a familiar voice called my name from the doorway. "Mr. Brooks." I turned. It was Cal, one of the guys who used to work for me back in the old shop. He looked nervous, twisting his cap in his hands. "I wasn't sure if I should tell you this," he said, "but you should probably know. Your boy's back in the business." My stomach tightened. Jason. Cal nodded. "Yes, he's up in Des Moines now. Opened some fancy real estate firm. Calls it Brooks Properties Group. Says it's a family legacy." I just stared at him. Cal hesitated. "That ain't all. He's been telling folks you passed away last year. Says he's carrying on your name to honor you." The chisel slipped from my hand and hit the floor. For a second, the room was dead quiet, except for the echo of metal on concrete. Liam looked at me, eyes wide. "Mr. Brooks," I didn't answer. I just kept staring at the spot where the chisel had fallen, the blade glinting under the light, like a mirror. My reflection stared back, old-lined and calm. Too calm. Because that was the moment I knew the boy I raised had buried me in name. Now it was my turn to remind him I was still alive. I walked to the corner of the office, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a worn leather folder: bank papers, property deeds, old insurance bonds. Everything still there, untouched. $5 million. Every penny earned by my hands. Every nail, every hour, every piece of wood that ever passed through this shop. He thought he'd inherited a dead man's name. He was about to learn how dangerous it can be when the dead man's still breathing. When a man steals from you, it hurts. But when it's your own son, that wound doesn't bleed. It rots. Quietly. I didn't go looking for it. The proof found me. A letter came in the mail from the county registrar. It congratulated me on finalizing the property transfer for Lot 12 Cedar Creek Road. Problem was, I never sold that land. It was 3 acres, part of my late wife's inheritance. I stared at the envelope, tracing the ink on the signature line. My own name written clean and confident. Except, it wasn't mine. Jason had forged it. The moment I realized that the world around me didn't explode, it narrowed. Like all the noise had been sucked out of the air, leaving just the hum of the fluorescent light and the pulse in my ears. I folded the letter and placed it neatly back inside the envelope. Then I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat down at the kitchen table, and waited for the anger to come. It didn't. Only something colder did, a kind of calm that feels like control. That night I drove down to the river. The water was black, moving slow under the bridge. I stood there with the letter in my pocket, and for a second, I thought about throwing it in. Pretend I'd never seen it. Pretend my son was still the boy with sawdust in his hair, asking how to build birdhouses. But lies don't disappear when you throw them away. They float back downstream sooner or later. So I drove home, sat at my desk, took out a blank card. On the front, I drew a single line the shape of a nail, simple, sharp. Inside I wrote, "You always said money is power. Let's see how powerful you are, without a single ounce of humanity." I didn't sign it, didn't have to. I mailed it the next morning. 2 days later, I got a phone call. Jason's voice came through tight and furious. "What the hell is this supposed to mean? You tell me," I said. He laughed a short, bitter laugh. "You've lost it, old man. First you blow your savings. Now you're sending threats. You need help." Maybe I said calm as stone. Or maybe I finally found clarity. He hung up. The next week, a man in a suit came by the workshop. "Mr. Brooks," he asked, flashing a card. "I'm attorney Scott Melton. Your sons asked me to handle some family matters." I wiped my hands on a rag. "What kind of matters?" He hesitated, glancing at the workers behind me. "Your son's concerned about your mental stability. He's considering filing for guardianship to manage your assets properly." That word guardianship hit me harder than the lie itself. He wanted to declare me unfit, to take everything legally this time. I smiled, just barely. "Tell Jason I've been managing wood and men longer than he's been alive. And if he wants a fight, he can come look me in the eye like a man." The lawyer cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "Sir, my advice, son," I interrupted. "You're standing in a room built by my hands. Don't give advice in a place that could break you." He left quick. That night, Liam found me sitting at the desk, staring at a stack of papers, property deeds, insurance documents, old letters from Anna. He poured 2 coffees and said softly, "You don't have to take this alone." I nodded. "I'm not. I've got something stronger than anger." "What's that?" time? Because I'd learned that revenge built slow lasts longer. For the next few weeks, I gathered everything: records, tax files, old photos with dates printed in the corners. Every nail and screw of my life cataloged, documented, verified. Not to defend myself, but to prepare a truth that couldn't be twisted. Then one morning, while I was closing the shop, a car pulled up. A familiar figure stepped out, gray hair still sharp in the eyes. "Damn Harold Brooks," he said with a grin. "You haven't aged a day. Just rusted a little." It was Walter Jenkins, my old friend from trade school. He'd gone on to become a lawyer, then retired up north. We shook hands, and for the first time in months, I actually smiled. "Walter," I said quietly, "I need your help." He raised an eyebrow. "You in trouble or planning it?" "Neither," I said. "I'm planning something fair." We sat in the corner of the shop, 2 old men with too much past between them. I told him everything: the fake signature, the lies, the foundation, the insult of being called insane by your own blood. He listened, didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he leaned back, crossed his arms and said, "You don't want a lawsuit, do you?" "No," I said. "I want a lesson." He smiled. "Then you came to the right man." I handed him a folder, my will dated 20 years ago. He flipped it open, brows lifting as he read. "You planning to change this?" "Yes," I said. "But I'm not leaving money anymore. I'm leaving a message." Walter nodded slowly, eyes glinting with something like admiration. "You're not writing a will, Harold. You're writing a sermon." I smiled faintly. "Maybe." But this one won't save souls. It'll test them. 3 months passed. Long enough for the storm to settle, and for me to build the kind that doesn't make noise until it hits. Walter Jenkins came down every other weekend, briefcase in hand, smile half cocked, like a man who's seen too much to be impressed by anything anymore. Together, we rewrote everything, every clause, every signature, every silent line that would make the next chapter mine, not Jason's. The new will was clean, brutal in its simplicity. All assets, real estate, savings, retirement insurance, transferred in full to the Brooks Foundation, a registered nonprofit to be run by Liam O'Connor as director and trustee. No room for debate, no loopholes, just truth in ink. When Walter handed me the final draft, he said, "You sure about this, Harold? Once this is signed and filed, there's no going back." I looked at the paper, the weight of 40 years of sweat compressed into a few printed pages. "I'm not leaving a fortune, Walter," I said quietly. "I'm leaving a compass." We signed that afternoon. Not a tremor in my hand. It was the calmest I'd felt in years. Jason got the legal notice a week later. I didn't hear from him for 2 days. Then the call came. He didn't bother saying hello. "What the hell did you do?" he hissed through the line. "You gave everything to that street rat." To him. "His name is Liam," I said. "You've lost your damn mind, old man. You can't just sign your life away." I let the silence stretch. "I already did. And it's my life, not yours." He started shouting, then words about betrayal, family reputation. Somewhere in the noise he said, "You're gonna regret this." I almost smiled. "I already have, son, for years." He slammed the phone down. 3 weeks later, I was served. Brooks versus Brooks filed in county court. Jason claimed I was mentally incompetent, manipulated by my adopted assistant, and incapable of managing my estate. When the summons came, Liam froze. "Marcia. Brooks. He's really doing it." "Let him," I said, folding the paper neatly. "Some lessons need an audience." The courthouse smelled of stale coffee and anxiety. Jason came in, flanked by 2 lawyers, sharp suits, sharper faces. He didn't look at me, not once. I sat with Walter beside me, my old hands folded on the table. When the judge called my name, I stood straight-backed, clear-eyed. Jason's attorney began with a rehearsed speech. "My client believes his father, Mr. Harold Brooks, has been deceived by an opportunist seeking to exploit his declining mental health." Walter chuckled under his breath. "They're painting you senile," he whispered. "Good," I said. "Makes what happens next sting worse." Then it was my turn. Walter called me to the stand. He asked about my finances, my work, my foundation. Every answer was steady, factual. I knew every number, every date. The courtroom got quieter with each response. Finally, Jason snapped. He jumped up before his lawyer could stop him. "He's lying. That kid manipulated him. He's after the money." The judge warned him to sit down. He didn't. "He's not even family," Jason yelled, pointing at Liam. "He's a charity case. And you," he turned to me, voice breaking, "you let him steal what's mine." I looked at him for a long time, long enough for the silence to turn heavy. Then I said, calm and clear, "No, Jason. He didn't steal it. You just gave it away when you stopped being my son." The room went dead still. Even the judge looked up from his notes. Jason shook his head. "You've been brainwashed." I leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on his. "I wasn't tricked, Jason. I tested you. I wanted to see who would stand beside me when there was nothing left to take. Liam did. You didn't." He stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. I straightened my back and said the words I'd been holding for years. "You think blood makes you family. It doesn't. Choice does. And I chose the one who stayed when you left." Walter nodded toward the bench. Your Honor, the will is valid, the witness signatures verified, and the testator is in full possession of his faculties. The law is clear. The judge glanced between us, then spoke slowly. The court recognizes the will as legally binding. The estate shall remain under the Brooks Foundation as per Mr. Harold Brooks's wishes. Jason's jaw clenched. He stood so fast the chair toppled behind him. You think this is over? He shouted. I'll burn that damn foundation to the ground. He stormed out before the bailiff could stop him, his footsteps echoing off marble and reage. I sat there a moment longer, breathing steady, feeling the kind of silence that only comes when truth has done its job. Walter leaned in, his voice low. Well, Harold, he said, you just buried your son without a coffin. I looked toward the courtroom doors still swinging from Jason's exits. He said, No, I said softly. He buried himself. The fire came without warning. No thunder, no storm, no spark from the machines. Just a red bloom in the night sky, sudden, violent, hungry. By the time I got the call, the shop was already half gone. I could see the flames from the hill, stretching up against the black Iowa sky like some kind of twisted sunrise. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, but my chest felt hollow. When I pulled up, the air was thick with smoke and memory. The foundation, my second life, my redemption, was being swallowed whole. Liam was already there shouting orders, coughing through the smoke as he tried to help the firefighters drag out what they could. Mr. Brooks, he yelled, voice cracking. We can still save the east wall. I grabbed his shoulder. No, I said, my voice low, calm in a way that scared even me. Let it go. The men kept working, water hissing against fire, but the building was doomed. You could hear the wood screaming as it split and collapsed. Every beam I'd cut, every nail I'd driven, turning into ash before my eyes. The smell of burnt oak filled the air, the same wood I'd spent my life shaping, now shaping its way back into smoke. By morning, it was nothing but cinders and silence. The cops came, clipboards and questions in hand. Any idea who might want to hurt you, Mr. Brooks? One of them asked. I looked at the blackened remains, the warped metal sign that still read Brooks Foundation in faint letters. Plenty of people might have wanted to, I said softly. Only one needed to. The officer scribbled something down, probably thought I was just another old man with grudges. Liam came over, soot streaked across his face. His eyes were red, not from the smoke, but from something deeper. This was arson, Mr. Brooks. Someone did this on purpose. I didn't answer, just nodded slowly. Jason, he said finally, the name like a curse he didn't want to speak. Still, I said nothing. He took a step closer. We should press charges, file a report, let the police do their job. I turned to face him. The firelight still glowed faintly on the horizon, flickering off the wet ground. No, I said. We don't fight fire with fire. He frowned. Then how? We wait. Wait for what? For a man to see what he's done when the world finally holds up a mirror. He wanted to argue. I could see it in his eyes. But instead, he nodded, jaw tight. He trusted me, maybe too much. We spent the next few days cleaning what was left. Most of the boys from the foundation showed up to help. No one asked for money. No one complained. They just worked quietly, side by side. You learn a lot about people when there's nothing left to gain. By the end of the week, all that remained was the front step, a slab of concrete, with one word carved into it: faith. Anna had written it years ago, back when the shop was just an idea. I ran my hand over the letters, blackened, but unbroken. Faith, I whispered. Guess you're still here, old girl. That night, I sat on the back porch of the house, watching the horizon fade into darkness. The wind smelled of smoke and pine. Liam sat beside me, 2 mugs of coffee between us. You really think he did it? He asked quietly. I think, I said, staring into the dark, that when a man starts lying to himself, he'll burn down anything that reminds him of the truth. We didn't speak after that. Just listened to the night, the crickets, the wind, the faint crackle of dying embers. A week later, I was sanding a new piece of wood on the back porch, not to build, just to remember the sound when the phone rang. Liam answered. I heard his voice shift from calm to shock. Yes, this is Liam O'Connor. What? When he hung up, looked at me, pale as ash. It's Jason, he said. I set down the sandpaper. What about him? They're investigating him. The state's financial crimes unit. I didn't move. For what? Fraud, Liam said. His company, Brooks City Development. They say he used fake investors, phony invoices, and laundered money through shell accounts. I leaned back in the chair, eyes on the fading sky. And the money came from? I asked, already knowing the answer. Liam swallowed. From the foundation funds he tried to claim were part of his company portfolio. They found the documents, Mr. Brooks. They found everything. I nodded once, slow. The mirror, I said quietly. He finally looked into it. Liam's voice was soft, almost a whisper. What are you going to do? I sipped my coffee, still warm. Nothing, I said. Sometimes justice doesn't need help. It just needs time. Out beyond the fields, sirens started to wail, faint, distant, moving toward town. I closed my eyes, not in victory, not in peace, but in something heavier, the knowledge that a son's fall doesn't make a father rise. It just evens the ground between them. The first time I saw Jason's face on the news, I didn't recognize him. The man staring back from the television wasn't my son, not the boy who once built crooked birdhouses and bragged they were better than dad's. No, this man had eyes like broken glass, and a jaw clenched so hard it looked carved from stone. The headline read, Local developer Jason Brooks arrested on charges of fraud and embezzlement. They showed clips of him in handcuffs, walking through the courthouse doors, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions he didn't answer. The irony didn't escape me. The son who once accused me of being outdated, now undone by his own modern deceit. Liam turned off the TV. You want me to get rid of these papers? He asked softly. I shook my head. No. Let them sit. Some things are worth looking at, peace. He hesitated, studying my way. You okay? I said, almost stealing. That depends what you call okay. The truth was, I didn't feel anger. Not satisfaction either. Just a strange, dull ache in the chest, the kind that doesn't heal, doesn't hurt, just reminds you something once mattered. The reporters came, of course. They always do when blood and money share a last name. Mr. Brooks, did you know about your son's crimes? Do you have any comment on Brooks City Development? Is it true? Your own foundation exposed the fraud. I didn't answer a single one. I just kept sanding a frame outside the house, pretending the sound of wood against paper could drown out their noise. When they left, the silence hit harder than before. That night, while I was closing the back door, I noticed an envelope on the porch. No postage. Just my name written in Jason's handwriting, firm, impatient, familiar. I took it inside, sat down at the kitchen table, where everything in this story had started, and opened it. There was only one line. I don't understand why you hate me this much. No apology, no explanation. Just that. A sentence heavy with confusion, maybe pride, maybe pain. I read it twice. Then I folded it, slipped it into the breast pocket of my flannel shirt, and poured myself a drink. For hours I sat in the dark, the sound of the old clock ticking like a heartbeat. I told myself I didn't owe him a response, that a man has to lie in the bed he's made. But when the night grew quiet enough, memory crept in, like smoke through the cracks. I saw him again, 6 years old, standing barefoot in the workshop, sawdust clinging to his hair. He held a hammer too big for his hand, eyes bright proud. "Look, Dad," he said, pointing at a stack of mismatched boards. "I'm gonna build a house, bigger than this one, for you and Mom." And he believed it. God, he really did. I remember laughing, ruffling his hair, saying, "You do that, son. Build it strong. Build it honest." Somewhere along the way, he forgot the second part. Maybe I did too. I sat there until the whiskey was gone, and the letter felt like lead against my chest. I took it out, looked at his handwriting again, bold, unshaken, just like him. I thought about all the times I'd stayed silent when I should have spoken, when I'd chosen discipline over understanding. Maybe my quiet had raised him as much as my hands had. I slid the letter back into my pocket. Didn't burn it. Didn't throw it away. Just kept it close, because even pain feels like company when you've been alone too long. The next morning I woke before sunrise. The air was cold, the kind that bites your lungs and clears your head. I made coffee black and bitter and stared at the road leading out of town. Liam came into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. "You're up early." "Didn't sleep," I said. He glanced at my coat hanging on the chair, keys already in my hand. "Where you headed?" I didn't answer right away. Just looked out the window at the frost creeping up the glass. Finally, I said, "The county jail." Liam froze. "You sure about that?" I nodded. "First time in years, maybe the last time. But it's time." He tried to smile, but it came out sad. "Want me to come with you?" I shook my head. "No. This one's between fathers and sons." I stepped outside the morning light, barely breaking through the clouds. The truck engine groaned to life, old and stubborn like me. As I drove past the burnt foundation, past the fields that once held every good thing I'd built, I felt that same ache again. Pride, regret, love, all tangled up, like roots under the dirt. I pressed my foot on the gas, eyes fixed on the road ahead. Because no matter how far a son falls, a father always drives toward him, even when he swears he won't. The county jail sat at the edge of town, gray and teared like a scar the city tried to forget. The guard at the front desk checked my ID, asked if I was family. I said once. He didn't ask again. They led me through a long corridor, walls, the color of regret, lights buzzing overhead. At the end of it was the visitation room, glass metal chairs, and the quiet hum of lives waiting to start over or end badly. Jason was already there, thinner than I remembered. The sharpness that once came from pride now came from hunger, hunger for something even he couldn't name. He looked up when I walked in, and for a second, neither of us spoke. He picked up the phone on his side of the glass, and I did the same. "Didn't think you'd come," he said, voice rough, eyes dark. "I almost didn't," I answered. "But then I remembered leaving is something you were always better at than me." He gave a bitter smile, the kind that covers shame with sarcasm. "You here to see the show? Your son finally paying for his gourmets?" I shook my head slowly. "No, Jason. I came to see if there's anything left of the man I raised." He leaned back, folding his arms. "Don't give me that fatherly wisdom, Dad. You won. You got everything, the house, the foundation, the sympathy. Congratulations." "You think this is winning," I said quietly, "watching your own blood in a cage." He looked away. "Don't act like you care. You never did." I let that one hang between us. The kind of accusation that hurts not because it's false, but because it's earned. Finally I said, "You're wrong, son. I cared too much, just not in the way you needed. I thought teaching you how to build would teach you how to live. But somewhere between the wood and the walls, I forgot to teach you why it matters." His face cracked for a moment, a twitch of pain gone as fast as it came. He looked down at his hands, wrists bruised from the cuffs. "I don't know how it got this bad," he said softly. One deal led to another. I thought I was building something big, something you'd be proud of. I leaned closer to the glass eyes locked on him. Pride's a tricky thing. It makes men build towers when all they really needed was a home. He swallowed hard. I don't have anything left, Dad. For the first time since he was a boy, I saw the truth in his eyes. No walls, no arrogance. Just a man stripped down to bone and regret. I don't have a company. No money. No friends. Nothing. I nodded slowly. Then you've got something money can't buy, a clean start. He looked at me confused. I said, you start from zero like I did. With a hammer, a dream, and a reason not to quit. He laughed weakly, almost a sob. You think I can come back from this? I smiled faintly. You don't come back, Jason. You build for it. For a moment, the silence between us felt heavy, but not hostile. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, embarrassed by the tears he didn't mean to show. Why'd you come? He whispered. I took a deep breath. Because a father's job isn't to save his son. It's to give him one last door to walk through before the world locks them all. The guard signaled we had a minute left. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small worn card. I held it up against the glass so he could read it. It was white, simple, and a familiar Brooks Foundation. We build people before we build things. He stared at it for a long time. There's still a place for you there, I said. If you ever want to learn again what it means to make something that lasts. Jason pressed his hand against the glass. I pressed mine on the other side. No words. Just the faint reflection of two hands that used to build together, now divided by what one of them had broken. The guard tapped his watch. I stood up. Slowly. Goodbye, son, I said. He looked up, voice cracking. Dad. I paused. Thank you, he whispered, for coming. I nodded once. Then I walked out past the guards, past the noise, past the years that had come between us, into a world that suddenly felt both heavier and lighter at the same time. Outside the air was cold. The sun was coming up over the fields, soft and gold, washing the world in a kind of forgiveness only morning can offer. 2 years later, the house was quiet. The morning sun slipped through the curtains, soft and golden, falling across the old man's workbench. The scent of pine lingered in the air, the kind that stay even after the man who made it is gone. Harold Brooks died the way he lived, quietly, with his hands resting on a piece of unfinished wood, the chisel still warm where he'd left it. There was no struggle, no sound. Just peace, the kind a man earns, not receives. When they found him, the shop clock had stopped at 3:17 a.m. Liam said maybe the old thing finally gave up. But the others thought Harold just decided it was time. The memorial was held a week later in the rebuilt workshop, the new Brooks Foundation. The air buzzed with murmured voices, sawdust, drifting through sunlight, like tiny spirits of all the work that had been done there. Dozens of men and women filled the room. Ex-convicts, carpenters, veterans, young people who had learned from Harold how to build more than just furniture. On the wall behind the podium hung a wooden plaque with his words carved deep into the grain, "Build things that last longer than you." Liam stood at the front, wearing a simple black suit, calloused hands folded around a note he didn't need to read. Harold wasn't a man of many words. He began, voice trembling just enough to show the truth behind it. But when he spoke, it meant something. He taught us that hands aren't just for taking, they're for creating. He believed every find could start again, no matter how broken he was, as long as he was willing to work for it. He paused, smiling faintly. And he never asked for thanks. He just wanted us to pass it on. Behind him, the students nodded. Some wiped tears. Others just stared at the floor, lost in their own memories of the man who'd given them a second chance. At the very back of the room, Half hidden in the crowd stood Jason Brooks. Older now, his hair streaked with gray, his eyes quieter. He wore a carpenter's apron, clean, but worn at the edges, the same kind his father used to wear. He hadn't spoken to anyone when he arrived. Didn't need to. The room made space for him, without a word. He stood with his hands clasped, fingers rougher than before, scarred from work he'd done in the prison woodshop. When the service ended, people began to leave, but Jason stayed. He walked to the front step by step, until he reached the display table. There it was, his father's old hammer. The handle smooth from decades of use, initials HB burned into the wood. Jason reached out and picked it up. It felt heavier than he remembered, maybe because it carried more than metal now. It carried everything his father had tried to teach him. He ran a thumb along the handle, then whispered to no one, "You were right, Dad." A man's measured by his hands, not his bank account. The workshop was quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like presence, not absence. Light streamed through the high windows, laying across the benches, across Jason's face, across the hammer. He turned toward the wall, the one where his father's blueprint hung framed and faded. It showed the original design for the foundation. The signature in the corner, still clear, Harold Brooks, 2015. Jason stared at it for a long moment, then set the hammer down and reached for a piece of wood from the scrap pile. He placed it on the table, squared the edges, lifted the chisel, and began to carve. Each stroke was slow, careful, the sound of wood giving way to purpose. For the first time in his life, Jason wasn't trying to build a fortune. He was trying to build forgiveness. Outside, the wind moved through the fields, the same fields where his father had once taught him the rhythm of work. The light shifted, catching on the dust in the air, a soft shimmer that made the whole room glow. And if someone had been standing there long enough, they might have sworn the light curved just right, like two hands steady and patient guiding his. The shop was quiet again. The same sun that once rose over Harold's workbench now poured across Jason's hands, steady, scarred, and still learning. The hammer came down once, clean and sure, echoing through the room like a heartbeat that refused to fade. They said Harold Brooks left behind $5 million. But the truth is, what he really left was worth more, a lesson carved into time itself, that a man is not measured by what he owns, but by what he builds, and who he becomes after everything burns. Sometimes a father's revenge isn't punishment. It's redemption, disguised as love.